With Wonder Woman, Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Watchmen, the DC Universe has never been better.
We'll break it all down for you. Stick around for your Daily Charge.
Good morning and welcome to the Daily Charge. It's Monday, December 9th. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Oscar Gonzalez.
Let's get to today's headlines. The trailer for Wonder Woman 1984 popped up yesterday and was literally electrifying. We saw Wonder Woman lasso lightning as a novel form of transportation and don some new golden armor. And of all the trailers that we saw last week, I feel like that was the most, impactful for me. Oscar, what do you think?
It had a bit of everything. It had the action. It had all these questions that are coming up, and of course, it had Blue Monday.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's almost what everybody's talking about more than
the soundtrack definitely kind of makes this particular
the blending in.
Oh yeah.
That seemed to be like the key thing everybody was talking about.
Absolutely. The 80s vibe. Maybe I'm just because I'm an 80s kid.
So am I.
I was really drawn into that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So next up, Crisis on Infinite Earths premiered last night. And while we won't get into spoilers, it kicks things off in an epic and tragic way. Now, Oscar, I know you haven't watched this. The episode, but you are familiar with the story. I'm just curious, just your ideas, like as you're envisioning them try to put this on screen, like given your institutional knowledge about the arc, like how does that work in your head? Like, do you think that you'll just perennially be disappointed? Like, it's such an epic story, right?
From what I've seen so far, again, I haven't seen the episode, just seeing a couple of the trailers, a couple of other shots. It looks like they're going to do the best of what they can, just the same way the Avengers did with Infinity War.
Yep.
They're not going to have the 100, 200 heroes. In like the case of Civil War, they're not going to do that. It's the same thing. It's just, hey, let's bring what we can together,
right,
with all these characters from the past, and have some fun with it.
And they really did. I mean, just in the first few seconds alone, they referenced the 1989 Tim Burton Batman with a nice cameo, the 1966 Batman series with Burt Ward. It was just sort of like a nice nod, almost a celebration of like all things DC over the past 4 or 5 decades, which for me is, that's great. Like as a big fan of Superman and DC stuff, I just sort of appreciated that.
Yeah, hopefully I'll watch it. I know it has a weird sort of structure, so
it does. Yeah. It is It's basically 3 hours this year, and then early January concludes with 2 episodes. And it does. I think this is what makes it kind of intimidating for folks. Is it pulls together Supergirl, Batwoman, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, and The Flash. 5 shows. That's a big commitment for anyone, even a DC fan. I haven't actually watched pretty much any of those shows. I've been watching Arrow a little bit. But the good thing is with this first episode, when I jumped into it, I didn't feel like I was missing too much. There was some interpersonal drama. Last night's episode was a Supergirl episode, technically. So there were some cast members there like I wasn't even all that aware of. But I found it was fun to jump in fresh. So
yeah, that format reminds me of back in the old Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they would have the cliffhanger, and it'd be 3 months before you saw the next one.
Yeah. Fortunately, it's only a couple of weeks. So. All right, lastly, Watchmen may be the most buzzed about show out there. Oscar, you've watched it. I haven't had the time. I really want to watch it, though. But without getting into total spoiler territory, like what is it about the show that is worth our time?
The show has the big thing is written by Damon Lindelof, the guy who wrote Lost and The Leftovers. So it has all that mystery. The first episode... By the way,
that made me, when I first heard this announcement, I was a little standoffish about the whole project because... I was a big Lost devotee, and then the way it ended, I felt a little burned. His first movie was Prometheus, also another movie that didn't really stick its landing, so I was kind of, I was a little on guard with him.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But this is more like The Leftovers. Did you watch that?
Okay. I have not watched The Leftovers. Okay. I heard it's good after the first season, though.
Well, I liked all 3 seasons, but in the case of The Leftovers, is that it sets you up at the first couple episodes where you're not knowing what's going on.
Right.
It just throws everything at you, and you're just, what is this? And
is coming from the perspective of someone who's read the comics or hasn't read the comics?
Even someone, I've read the comics.
You're still just as lost.
I've read the comics. I read the prequel comics.
Okay.
I read the annotation comics. I read the current Doomsday Clock, which is like the current DC.
So you're an authority.
So I'm familiar, and even I was like, "What the hell's going on?"
Okay.
So that tells you that it set up all these mysteries because it's current day, and in the end, though, I won't obviously no spoilers, but The way Damon Lindelof does his writing is that there's an episode that explains everything, and that was last night's episode. And there's one episode left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. The Daily Charge. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Oscar Gonzalez.
Thanks for joining us. What do you care about? Is DC on the right track these days? I mean, what is sort of your favorite contribution to the brand? And do you want to see the Zack Snyder cut of the Justice League that's still kind of out there, rumored to be maybe around? Go ahead and sound off in chat. We'll keep the conversation going. BVG, what do you got for us?
First comments coming in from our friend Caleb Richardson. He says, I just finished Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1. Gotta say, totally lived up to the hype. I've been watching since Arrow Season 1 and been waiting for Crisis since Flash Season 1 finale. He goes on later to say, 8 years of build-up. I unfortunately missed the MCU train, kind of hopped on late with the Avengers, but have been watching the Arrowverse since the beginning. Roger, you're in that boat too, right?
I am. I watched Arrow since the beginning. I watched the first couple seasons of The Flash, but after a while, they started rolling out one show after another, and I watched a season of Supergirl and a season of Black Lightning, which is actually, it's not technically part of it, but the character will be in the crossover. But after a while, they just started cranking out so many shows that I just couldn't keep up, and as a father of two very young kids, that was just not an option anymore. That's why I was like kind of satisfied. Like, I was relieved to hear Arrow had like a very shortened season, because there's a much shorter commitment than, say, 22 episodes of Flash and Supergirl. So, for me, it kind of lived up to the hype. It was a really worthy kickoff. Like, again, I don't want to get into spoilers, but it ends in a surprising way. And so, it has me hyped up for the next 2 episodes this year, and then the final 2 next year.
Yeah, I'm impressed that there's hints of this early on. I watched first couple of seasons of Arrow and the first 2 seasons of Flash.
Yep.
And like bits like yourself, the bits of the others. But I didn't realize that there was hints of that. I know there was hints to other big stories.
The Flash in particular, the first season, I mean, they teased this newspaper article about Flash disappearing in a crisis. This is the crisis.
The crisis.
After how many years now? 6 years.
Yeah.
Like, this is something they've been building up to for a very long time. And it's impressive to see some of this stuff pay off.
Yeah.
Next one is coming in from Eric. He says, I love the Watchmen. Really could see that kind of story totally happening. I mean, it's a touchy one to get into, because there is a lot of stuff that we probably shouldn't talk about out loud, not only for spoiler reasons, but for general audience reasons. But how do you feel that fits? Because that was my personal takeaway. I was a little bummed when I heard, like, oh, they're doing another Watchmen. It's like, well, they already told that story several times over and did it really well. Do we really need a TV? It's like, oh, it's not. It's in the universe. It's related, but it's technically a sequel, but it's not even like a sequel to the movie. It's closer tied to the comics, but it's contemporary as opposed to the 1985 period piece that is Watchmen, eternally stuck in that time zone. What do you guys think about how Watchmen has been executed? Because I've heard so much great feedback from commentators about the socio-political and economics and all this other. Do you think it's a really, really roundabout way saying relevant story today?
It's definitely relevant. There's definitely the political tones that deal with the current events happening. As for, the story itself, it becomes canon as long as people like it. That's what it really is.
Yeah.
The prequel comics, a lot of people didn't like them. I liked them, but a lot of people didn't like them, didn't read them.
I've not read the prequel comics. Were they written by the original? Like,
Alan Moore definitely has not touched anything Watchmen.
Alan Moore basically he stopped with the Watchmen.
It was a whole mess with DC legal. It's a whole to do, and there's a lot of articles about it.
Right.
But no, those were written by other DC writers, and they took on a sort of prequel explaining, how Ozymandias became so wealthy, the comedian, what he did throughout the 60s and so forth. I liked them, but again, a lot of people didn't, so people have just forgotten about those.
Yeah.
And they're definitely not part of the canon of this show.
Right.
So in the end, if people like it, it's canon. If people don't...
In terms of... and I guess there might not be an answer to this question, but like, do you feel like you get more out of it because you've read The Watchmen and some of the other ancillary material, or do you think as a fresh viewer, not knowing anything about this property, that would have been a better experience or more confusing experience?
It would definitely be more confusing.
Okay.
A couple of the main characters from the comics obviously get introduced in the show. And when they show up, you, as someone that read the comics, you already know the backstory. You already know what they're referencing to. You already know kind of the all the points that are behind of what the motivations. You already know a bit of that. So it's definitely the impressive thing is to see Damon Lindelof sort of make this work for both new viewers and the comic readers, because the new viewers, the new people to the universe, they're amazed. They're just infatuated. They're just enthralled how amazing it is. They're the ones that are screaming from the mountains saying how great it is, versus people that watch the comics. They're like, this is great.
That's kind of interesting that the average viewer is the one that's turned into the hardcore fanboy.
Yeah, when I see people react, I can tell it's mainly for people that don't know what's going on, that are just so like, this is the best TV show ever. Not just of the year. They're saying it's the best show ever.
Really?
Some people are. Yeah.
I really need to watch the show.
I've been doing weekly articles. One just got published about what happened last night, and there's still questions. They answered so many questions last night, and there's still more questions.
Okay, and this is it's one more episode. It's a 9-episode season.
Yeah, they and that was arguably the smartest thing. One of the things I've hated about a lot of superhero shows, especially the Netflix ones, there's always that one big filler.
Yeah, well, sometimes there's more than one.
Well, that's it. Yeah. But Damon Lindelof, he said, we had one episode that was just a filler episode, and we just dropped it and went with 9. HBO said yes, and that was good.
Wow. Do you think a second season's coming up?
Considering, I put in my article that there is a little reveal that happened, well, kind of a big reveal, a reveal that happened that to me will be the start of a second season. And they're saying season finale, not series finale.
Okay.
So that should hint that there's a season 2 coming.
All right. Brian, what do we got?
Well, as long as they don't stretch it out to infinity. I like it when they have a clear path and they're going to that path. Maybe it's 3 seasons, maybe it's 1. Who knows? But I just don't want them to stretch that out, because right now, like, nothing but shining applause. And I think something should be said, too, about the filmmaking of it. The way it plays, it works really well in this serialized television format, as opposed to the comic, which a lot of people thought, like, oh, this will never translate to a movie. It's like, they did. It wasn't perfect, but I still enjoyed that Zack Snyder movie. But as far as this,
it's a great movie.
Well, this is a great show. Even if it didn't have the pedigree that is Watchmen, it was a very watchable show.
Right.
And it was faithful. It was completely faithful. Obviously, except for the movie, except for the last part. Obviously, except for the last part.
You know what? I didn't even have that big of an issue with the last part. I just thought it was almost too faithful. Like
that's the problem. That's the problem people had.
The same criticism I had with the first Harry Potter movie, where the director was like, it was almost slavishly, like there was no liberty taken to make it a movie experience. It was just sort of like, let's just take this book and the plot and let's just transport it into the movie. And so that's why I guess I am hopeful when looking into this Watchmen show, because it's clear that David Lindelof took some of the themes and the topics discussed there, the tone, and then he kind of brought it into the current age, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. And people throughout the Watchmen was considered one of those franchises that's never going to be adapted. It was just for the longest time, and there was a 2003 attempt at it that never worked. That never went off, and obviously 2009. But one of the ways people thought about adapting it was a TV show, because it makes sense considering
for sure.
It is a limited series of a comic, and obviously with TV show it fits.
Definitely, and the fact that it was such a deep graphic novel with so many different characters, so much depth to it. I felt like a movie was never going to do it justice.
No.
Yeah.
And some would argue that it never did. But again, I enjoyed it.
I still say it did.
I think it did. Let's keep that conversation going. Speaking of the filmmaking aspect, I would say some of the cinematography in the Watchmen show is up there with the likes of Mr. Robot. What's his name? Sam. Help me. Anybody? Who's the director of Mr. Robot?
Mendes? Or...
Mr. Robot?
Mr. Robot?
Yeah, it's always acclaimed for its cinematography and visuals, and I am an idiot, and I can't remember names ever. Anyways, anybody knows what...
Esmail.
Sam Esmail, yeah.
Oh, God. Okay.
I put it up there, not in the same caliber, but on the same quality, at least. It's just a gorgeous show. Brian also likes how Watchmen keeps you intrigued each episode without having to do all these infuriating cliffhangers, which a lot of shows are notorious for. Timothy asks, does the show Watchmen relate to the movie Watchmen? Sorry, I'm not an avid fan. That's fine, Timothy. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
It doesn't. The movie, it's only related to the original comic, 1985 comic. It has nothing to do with the movie, has nothing to do with the prequel, has nothing to do with anything else, just the original comic. That's it.
Yeah, as you can tell from some of the cutaway scenes and flashback scenes, no spoilers, it's not the finale from the film, it's the finale from the comic, which was always controversially changed, as we've been subtly referencing, or not so subtly referencing here today. Brian asks, I want to know which Earth Black Lightning is on. I hope Crisis finally answers that. Do we have any inclination?
We don't yet. I mean, and I haven't been, apologies, they might have mentioned it in one of the 50 shows that are currently on the CW that deal with DC, but it's clear that it's not the same Earth. Earth 1 is where the Arrow and Flash are. It's clear it's not that one, but maybe we'll see one. In previews and in like the promo photos, we've seen Black Lightning and Flash hang out together, so at some point we should get some guidance as to which Earth he's from.
Maybe on the Flash's episode.
Yeah. Is that tonight? No, tonight's Batwoman's episode, I believe, and then tomorrow's Flash. So,
okay.
Yeah.
It's funny, Oscar, I was a big reader of Infinite Crisis, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Final Crisis. I even read some of the lesser ones, like what was the one in Time? It was like a time crisis. Help
Countdown?
Me. Countdown. No, that was a Countdown to Final Crisis.
Okay.
Oh man, it was
a time travel crisis one?
Yeah, it was a time travel crisis. Help me.
Not Final Crisis.
No. Thank you, Oscar.
There are a lot of crises. DC really loves to.
Well, that's what I was getting at.
On the name
was
because there was. I mean, there's Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis, Crisis of.
I mean, there's a recent one that has something to do with like psychological rehab.
Was that Convergence?
No,
Convergence didn't get well received.
That one I did read.
0 Hour.
Zero Hour, that was it. I read that in college. It was not great.
No one likes that one. That's why I didn't realize it.
Yeah. Well, what I was driving at is a lot of other YouTubers are chattering about these crises these days. And I mean, what would you call your favorite?
Ooh. I mean, the original is hard to beat. And it was pretty slim. It was only, how many issues was the original?
The 1984 one?
Yeah.
Oh, it was 4?
Something like that, yeah.
It was definitely...
Now they're all like 12 issues long or whatever. I thought, was it Final Crisis was pretty good. It was kind of a weird one because I think that was Grant Morrison. And he dealt with the New Gods and stuff. That was kind of... It was weird.
It was a bit much.
Yeah.
Although there's a lot of sort of interpretation of what he was trying to... From what people are saying, that Final Crisis was basically not a middle finger to Alan Moore and Frank Miller, but it was kind of like a little poking fun at them because this is just a very short summary of what Grant Morrison was what people are thinking. What he's saying is that he was saying that we're leaving the gritty superheroes behind. And we're making something new, and that's what Final Crisis is about. But obviously, it's an interpretation.
Yeah.
When I started getting back to reading about the DC events, one of the first ones I read was Identity Crisis, and I just
Identity Crisis.
Yeah, I like a good murder
mystery.
Yeah.
Even though if that one was particularly dark.
Particularly
was
very dark.
Oh yeah.
And also a lot of characters not really within characters.
They were
definitely a lot of weird stuff happening.
Speaking of like dark and gritty, like that's definitely dark and gritty.
I mean, that was the 90s in a nutshell.
Yeah. Extreme was a positive attribute.
Yep.
Extreme.
And then this past one, now I can't even remember it. I just read it.
While you're looking for that, I just want to shout out Caleb and Storm King. It was Heroes in Crisis. That was what you were talking about.
That's the recent one, right?
Yeah,
that one. The titles could use a little help.
Yeah, Heroes in Crisis was like, all right, how do we get Crisis back? How do we shove Crisis?
It's like Marvel with Infinity.
That's true. That is very true.
But Heroes of Crisis, it was nice and touching. It was a bit of a murder mystery as well.
Right.
Although it was kind of It almost is a bit too much of trying to pull too much sympathy. Where the heroes, the whole sort of interesting hook is that the heroes are talking to a camera and they're saying like really how they feel bad about how they beat someone up or how they just hate themselves. It's it's like what you expect from them seeing a therapist. That's
basically all confessionals, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
and it's interesting, but then there's almost a bit too much of it. So where you're like, why are you? It really gets to you after a while.
Gotcha.
Reading him.
Next comment's coming from Storm King as well. He says, do they ever say what happened to Batman in Batwoman's Earth? Let's go ahead and stick that to the CW Berlanti-verse as opposed to the comics.
Yeah. No, not that I'm aware of. Although there was a teaser where I believe Batwoman sees Kevin Conroy's character and says Bruce, and so maybe Kevin Conroy plays him. We'll see. But yeah, like there's another one. Like Kevin Conroy, who's voiced Batman for decades, is a legend in the business, finally actually gets a chance to be on TV in real life as Bruce Wayne, which is kind of like an amazing nod to fans.
Yep. That's one of those things like the meme, everyone liked that. Like no one's going to be opposed to that.
Yep.
More comments and questions. Well, we got a few minutes left. Hang on. Nathan says, do you know if Tom Ellis is going to show up in Crisis as Lucifer? That was a rumor a while ago, and he openly denied it, but...
I'm not aware. Like, I've seen the same reports that you have, and he so far hasn't. I mean, he's denied it, and I have no reason to think he will be, because at least if you know the plot of this story arc, it doesn't really make sense for Lucifer to show up. But who knows?
It could be a quick cameo.
Although one quick, we were talking about sort of the cameos that showed up at the beginning of this first episode. One I just want to throw out, kind of a fun nod to, was the Titans. They had two cast members from the Titans show up. I think they just reused footage or something, but they were considered an Earth-9, so they're technically part of this multiverse, which again is like, it's interesting because this show just finished its second season on the DC Universe streaming service, and they threw a nod out to them as one of the many Earths out there. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Okay, next one is coming from Caleb. He says, my favorite DC movie is definitely Shazam. I did really enjoy Shazam. Let's go around the table. The rules are it has to be current, contemporary, like still running kind of thing. We can all go back and say The Dark Knight 1,000 times, but what's happening right now that you're most into? I'm sticking with Young Justice.
Ooh. And it was on any property, not just on the silver screen?
As long as it's modern.
Oh, man. Goodness. DC. Shazam was entertaining. I think I enjoyed Wonder Woman still a little bit more.
I'm on that track with Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of like,
although I want to see the new Harley Quinn cartoon.
Yeah, that does look good. I haven't had a chance to see it.
I have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've watched Titans, and I know I say I don't have a lot of time, but I've managed to find time to watch Titans, and I find that to be kind of a flawed show. But in terms of like most of the other DCU stuff, I'm like not really into. Like Aquaman, I actually found kind of disappointing.
I enjoyed Aquaman.
I didn't mind that much, but I rewatched Shazam because now it's it's easier to watch, and I'm still I told you when I first watched it, I told you my issue with it,
which was remind me again
that Billy Batts, he's as himself as the 14-year-old kid, he is too cool, and he is too suave, and then here he is as Shazam, and he's flossing, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
It doesn't connect.
I agree with you there. It was backwards. Like
it was.
They didn't feel like Zachary Levi was an aged-up version of the kid. More like
he was like
playing
a 7-year-old.
Zachary Levi was playing Zachary Levi with muscles.
No, Zachary Levi played a better 14-year-old than that kid did.
No, that's true.
Or that too.
Yeah. Also, I just found that movie to be like overly dark. Maybe it's just the parent in me. Like for a movie that was marketed towards kids, like there were some surprisingly dark moments in there.
There was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like weirdly interspersed between the flossing, there was,
All right, next one. Let's take another one from Timothy. He says, I would like to see more marketing and advertisement from DC. Seems like Marvel has more exposure nowadays. I think he's got a point there. DC has a hard time kind of wrapping let's say it's Warner Brothers, wrapping their marketing minds around like self-sustaining franchises that don't need to sell on like sex or drugs or whatever. Even the Shazam trailers didn't feel accurate, but I was still like, okay, I know they're going to go down this road, so I want to see that movie. It's going to be different than what we've been getting. But even like the Justice League stuff, I mean, go ahead and name anything else you can think of the top of your head where they've done a lousy job marketing that, or your awareness was just completely misguided.
For DC?
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much all of it. I feel like it's they don't. I mean, it's not. It's also not coordinated, right? There's all these different properties, so they're like. I actually think the CW shows are like generally in terms of marketing, like what you get is like what you see is what you get. Like I feel like I generally kind of like I'm not disappointed with the promise that they give me, as opposed to like everything else. Like I said, Titans I thought was really flawed. I think most of the DC movies are not marketed as well. The marketing from Wonder Woman was pretty decent, and like this new trailer showed that they've really stepped up their game. But yeah, I don't know. Like it's with all the Justice or the Zack Snyder movies, I was just sort of like.
It definitely seems like the DC marketing people or Warner Brothers marketing people, they're treating everything as if it's not the best. They're kind of putting everything they're compartmentalizing everything to where, all right, this is TV, so TV, we're not going to bother with that.
Right.
We'll throw an ad up on YouTube every now and then. And then in the case of, with the other previous movies where they made a big deal out of it. But in the case of Wonder Woman, they've been making a big deal out of it for the past year.
Right.
And then now
only until it became a hit. They weren't even sure it was going to be as big of a hit that it was. One other movie I forgot to bring up, that one other DC movie, Joker, like one of the biggest hits, one of the biggest R-rated hits of all time, just got some Golden Globe nominations.
A lot of nominations.
So yeah, there's another big win, and it's an interesting strategy. Like they're kind of pushing their own. The movies are all, there isn't an interconnected universe at this point, and like they're all kind of pushing and I think they should do that. Just push like a bunch of good quality standalone movies until you can get a track record up, and then work on the whole shared universe thing.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
DC's always been better at just one-offs and like screw the continuity kind of stuff. That's why Elseworlds is so great. And all the animated movies coming out of those these days are superior than most of the live-action ones. I'm going to go out and say it. That kind of segues. We were talking about the trailers. Storm King points out that Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice spoiled the Doomsday trailer. That's been a really nasty trend lately, is how trailers just kind of give up everything in the front, trying to just market you in the door. It's like, why would I spend money on what I already know happens? But right before the show today, we were talking about this, how a lot of the trailers this weekend that came out, and this in recent memory, have been just significantly better, in my opinion. Do a much better job of fan serving, but not giving up every single thing. And I want to go ahead and cite one that's a little bit off the beaten path here, but Ghostbusters. That Ghostbusters trailer that dropped this morning had me like in chills on the train on my way to work. What did you guys think?
Well,
and go ahead and recite what you were talking about Wonder Woman, how the trailer brings you in the door, but doesn't give you the entire movie.
Yeah, in the case of Wonder Woman, you still have questions about Pedro Pascal's character and about Kristen Wiig's character. Right. So you have no idea, if you're not familiar with them in comics, you have no idea what's going on.
It was interesting because my wife, after she watched the trailer, was like, "So who's the villain in this thing?"
Exactly.
I was like, "Oh, well, they did a good job."
The one thing about the Ghostbusters that I was saying earlier is that this would have been amazing to see in the theater, in front of a movie. And you had no idea it was a Ghostbusters trailer until that minute in, where you see, what is this? Hey, this is a ghost trap.
Right.
Oh my God, the theater would have lost their minds if that happened.
Yeah.
But it was still a great trailer and has a lot of questions.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
I was less excited maybe because I was coming off the high of Wonder Woman and like that the pop and the color there. This is definitely a very different tone.
Right.
I am intrigued by what this movie holds and like how it ties back into legacy Ghostbusters, but it's it was a little bit more sedated for me. I also watched it like in the middle of doing a million things, so that could have affected my appreciation for it.
Yeah, and I do find it funny. People are like, well, it has a Stranger Things vibe. I'm like, well, it has one of the kids from Stranger Things. He's right there.
Right.
I mean, and then Wonder Woman 1984 had Stranger Things vibes because it's 80s at the mall.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the Duffer Brothers are having a pretty significant influence on our cultural consumption these days.
Definitely.
Before we shut things down, one more comment from Brian says, given how Batman v Superman turned out, do you think a Snyder cut of Justice League is anywhere better than the reality that we got with the Joss Whedon fix-ups? This is a tough one.
You know what? I would say it's probably more of a coherent story and trend or tone, because it did feel like the Justice League we got was a product of two different directors with competing visions. So I am curious to see the Snyder Cut, just to see what like the original vision would have been, because it's clear a lot of it got
Muddled
and chopped up and just changed wholesale.
Although I'm not convinced that if they released a full cut that it's all going to be great. I'm pretty sure a lot of it is terrible.
Yeah,
but there's a good chunk of it that it helps the story.
I think things would make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Things that are teased will pay off. Again, I don't know if it'll be any good. Chances are it'll be terrible. I thought Batman vs Superman and Man of Steel.
I mean, it still has
were not
Steppenwolf, which is just
right. You can't get away from the fact that you've got a villain that like nobody knows.
No.
Yeah.
All right, and finally, closing thoughts from Yan. Are any of us Marvel fans or DC fans?
I mean, I'm fans of both. That sounds like kind of a weak answer, but I mean,
It's kind of hard not to be these days, to an extent, I would say.
I am definitely more on the Marvel side, just because those were the comics I first read. So those are characters I'm more familiar with. But the DC stuff is still fun. I mean, it's still hard to beat a good Batman.
And look, I think the Marvel films are fantastic. I think DC has sort of a good collection of properties outside of the movies. Some of the movies are good, some of them are bad. They're getting better, but I think there are other. If you're a DC fan, there's like other avenues beyond the comic books that you can take in.
Yeah, especially those animated movies. Those are great.
But like DC's been doing it longer too. I mean, if we didn't have Superman, we wouldn't probably have any of these movies these days. Yeah. That's why I say I was raised a DC kid. I've said it before. But as much as geekdom is cursed to ever want to fight and versus each other, it's Star Trek and Star Wars is science fiction and science fantasy. Marvel is about men becoming gods, and DC is about gods wanting to become men. They're completely different franchises, completely different concepts. They just get bundled together because comics are comics, right? Mm-hmm. I think taking a perspective where you realize that they both have very different purposes, they just package in a very similar way. I think that is a good way to look at the modern mythos that is comic books. And I'm getting up on a soapbox here, but I'm a DC kid. Of course, we're going to go and think things over way too much. It's just inherent. But really great conversation today, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Roger, you want to go ahead and take us on out?
Yeah, we would appreciate it if you would subscribe and ring the notification bell if you haven't already, so you can join us weekday mornings and be part of the show. Also, feel free to head on down to the show description where you can find links to today's stories and every place you can subscribe to the audio podcast. If you'd rather take the show on the go. For the Daily Charge, I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Oscar Gonzalez.
Thanks for joining us.